There we go.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Bored as Hell podcast. I'm Ursula the Sea Witch with Big Shiny Robot.
And I am Andy Wilson, aka Citizen Bot, also a big shiny robot.
Just kidding. As you can tell, this is Adam. I'm still not better. I hate being sick. But anyways, we are still here because we want to talk to you about a couple movies. We have Macbeth, In the Heart of the Sea, and then we're going to jump into our final bit of Star Wars retrospective with Return of the Jedi, so we can all finish up just in time for The Force Awakens. So Andy got to see these. And the movie I saw was The Hateful Eight, which unfortunately I'm embargoed and I cannot discuss for a week and a half. I will just say that it's a movie and it exists. So, but we're looking forward to talking about that one. But Andy, so Herman Melville to Shakespeare, what was the better movie here?
They could both basically be the same movie. Great source material, boring execution.
Oh,
I'm gonna flip a coin, and we're gonna go with Macbeth first because I saw Macbeth on Monday, and I saw In the Heart of the Sea on Tuesday.
and it's who's in this one again? Is it Michael
It's Michael
Fassbender?
Fassbender and Marion Cotillard as Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and they actually do a really good job. I mean, look, let's Badger. It's Michael Fassbender and Marion Cotillard, and look, they do great in this movie. I mean, those are two of the best actors of their generation. It's just unfortunate that they get put into a kind of odd version of Macbeth, which I know you're a theater guy. I'm a theater guy. I love Macbeth. I actually saw Macbeth at the Utah Shakespeare Festival, several years back, and it was one of the best things I've ever seen. It's a really what should be an easy to adapt film. It's just the director here decided that, hey, they talk about all these big battles and all these things. Well, why don't we just go ahead and film them?
Are you serious?
Yeah, which actually is kind of cool.
Yeah, but that's not what Macbeth is about. It's like everybody doing
Yeah,
Hamlet and making it a pirate movie.
yeah, no, exactly. You're right. And so in that attempt to start this movie off with a big and bloody battle sequence, uh, you lose some of what makes Macbeth Macbeth. And I think they did that in a lot of things here. They actually trimmed a lot of things out of the script, which, I mean, look, if you've ever seen a film version of Hamlet, unless it's the 4 hours long one with Kenneth Branagh, there was cutting from that.
Well, yeah, you have to. I mean, you're talking about a play that's a multi-hour long play
Yeah,
that back in the day that was their movies. I mean, that was what they had. So unless you're actually going to a theatrical production, I mean, even most theatrical productions, unless it's like Broadway, they're still cutting stuff because there's just too much. I mean, a lot of times you've got college students or other people or even community theater, and the amount of time it takes to as one who's done it to memorize all those lines is just a
yeah,
bit astounding.
yeah. And so, but you take the problem isn't when you cut Shakespeare. The problem is when you cut Shakespeare
And add to
and
it.
and you cut some of the most iconic stuff. Like you think of the witches from Macbeth.
Oh yeah, that they're how important they are.
Yeah, how important they are. Double, double, boil and
Boil trouble, yeah.
and by the pricking in my thumb, something wicked this way comes. Yeah, neither of those are anywhere
Are
in.
you serious?
No, and so I get what director Justin Kurzel was trying to do. He was trying to take it down a notch, and he was trying to make this a grounded, not supernatural film based on Macbeth. And so the witches are just kind of strangely clairvoyant ladies who appear out of the mist and say some random stuff to Macbeth and Banquo, and they're like, "Hey, you're gonna be king, and you're gonna be your sons are going to be kings, and that's kind of it. And they take a lot of that supernatural element out of it and instead make it really bloody, really dirty. I mean, the scene right after the big battle sequence, like there's like a giant heap of bodies that they're burning, and Macbeth and Banquo are lying there on the dirt talking to one another, and they're just covered in filth. Because I mean, that's what you would look like after one of these epic battle sequences. Yeah, I kind of wish that they'd kept the theatricality more in it and didn't have to bring that realism to it. The play also, or the movie also gets a little bit uncomfortably sexual in places where there's, you know, the great scene where okay, so for those not familiar with Macbeth,
and shame on you.
yeah, well, it's okay. We're, you know, not everyone's into Shakespeare, but you know, Macbeth.
Shame. Shame.
So for those of you not familiar with Macbeth, shame, but Macbeth is a Scottish lord who is loyal to King Duncan, played here by the same guy who played Lupin in the Harry Potter movies. He's very good. He's very good in this role, actually. And these witches show up and say, "Hey, guess what, Macbeth? You're going to be king." And so Macbeth tells his wife this, and she's like, "Hey, you know, if we just like murder the king, then you're gonna basically be next in line because everybody loves you so much."
Yeah.
And then, of course, Macbeth, finding out that murders are like potato chips and you can't have just one, decides to go on a killing spree and goes after everyone. And yeah, it's
And they all die.
and everybody dies. So there you go. That's Macbeth for you. But the great scene between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, where she's trying to convince him that they should murder the king, and he's like, no way we can do that. Like, let's just see this thing through, and if this prophecy is going to happen, it's going to happen. There's this great element that Shakespeare wrote into it where it is very seductive on the part of Lady Macbeth and the way that she's trying to convince her husband.
Yeah, she's trying to lure him into basically her plot.
Yeah, and that's why people often refer to a Lady Macbeth as someone who is behind the scenes and trying to, you know, do horrible things. It gets a little overt here because I don't remember quite so much hand stuff going on in the original Shakespeare text. You know, I like the idea of a of a seduction, and man, I have seen some steamy on-stage performances of Macbeth where there is definite sexuality implied, but not quite so overt as here. And look, Joss Whedon did it in his Much Ado About Nothing.
Which actually I was going to bring up about taking a modern retake, but still keeping the classics of what makes, you know, the original so great. And that's a perfect example because that movie's fantastic.
Yeah, but he had some definite like sexuality going
bits,
with Conrad, but I think that was more a wink of like, you know, hey, we gender swap this character, so now we're gonna add an extra layer of insanity onto this with that. But look, just because Joss Whedon did it doesn't mean that you should do it for your movie, Justin Kurzel. So let's.
Because one of you is a better director.
Now, let me go back to the directing. This film is beautifully shot. I mean, amazing cinematography. So much of this is out on the misty moors of Scotland, and you are there. I mean, it feels cold watching this movie. I wish they had paid as much attention to bringing through the pathos and the the main bits of this movie as they did to building atmosphere. And it's not that the performances are bad. It just didn't quite gel. So I don't
Hmm.
know exactly where the problem was here, but I know that it is definitely amongst my least favorite filmed adaptations
Oh.
of Macbeth. And I just got really bored. There's some cool stuff in here, and if you're a fan of Shakespeare, you should probably go see this. I kind of feel about this the same way I felt about Krampus last week. Like if you like Macbeth, if you like the idea of a rampaging evil Santa monster, then you're gonna want to go see this. But everyone else is like, nah, no.
Well, and the thing with Shakespeare is Shakespeare can be very dry and boring if it's not brought to you in the right way. So, if it's someone who didn't bring the right kind of inflection and the right kind of tone to the dialogue, it's going to be heavy-handed. It's going to be something that's you're probably not going to enjoy. So,
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. It was a little more dense than it needed to be, and I just found myself being bored with a play that is one of my more favorites of Shakespeare's, especially of Shakespeare's tragedies. So,
yeah.
really sorry to say that, but 4 out of 10.
Oh wow, I thought you were maybe going to 5 or 6.
Yeah, no, not quite. It and the the problem with this being boring is shared by the next movie, In the Heart of the Sea, which is also an adaptation of sorts. Although I guess maybe we can call it a reverse adaptation. Director Ron Howard is trying to tell the quote unquote real life story of what happened to the whaling vessel, the Essex, which is supposedly the basis for
Moby Dick,
novel
yeah.
Moby-Dick. So our film actually opens uh, with um, with Herman Melville, played here by Ben Wheatham, who we saw as Q in the James Bond movies, most recently Inspector.
Yep.
He's good. We like him. He shows up and he is trying to track down the last survivor of the Essex, played by Brendan Gleeson, who is one of my favorite character actors. Like, just do yourself a favor if you haven't seen In Bruges. That's a really fun movie.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's one.
yeah, I really like Brendan Gleeson. He doesn't get enough really great roles, and he is unfortunately the best part of this movie. Even though the conversation between him and Melville, where Melville's trying to like wheedle the story out of him, is just it's it's just boring and it's just extra padding, and it's like, hey, why are we sitting here with you two guys talking in a
Hmm.
room about what you're going to tell us in the story instead of actually just showing us the story? Like, there's sometimes when like the story within the story element is good. Here it was completely unnecessary. Any dramatic tension that they tried to build up in the rest of the story is lost, and it just goes nowhere. But that story that they're trying to tell, well, we've got you got your Chris Hemsworth as the first mate on the Essex. And,
Thor,
yeah, Thor, and then you've got Benjamin Walker, who
Spider-Man.
no,
Oh, you know,
he was Abraham Lincoln, vampire hunter.
but we do get Spider-Man too.
Oh, was he in Spider Man
No,
too?
Tom Holland's in it.
Oh, okay. Oh, Tom. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so yeah, Tom Holland. Yeah, and Tom Holland plays Brendan Gleeson's younger self. But you've got Thor and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter as first mate and captain of the Essex, and they don't like each other a whole lot. And basically, Chris Hemsworth is the son of a farmer, and he worked his way up, and he's ready to be captain. And Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, well, he was born to the sea because his daddy and his grandpappy and all the way up their line, they're old whalers, and he just kind of fell into his lap. So yeah, that is there's some definite tension there, and they try to bring on these elements of like classism and and lineage, and it just doesn't work. It's like that might have been interesting, but it's just not handled very well. Where the film does get interesting are the action sequences where they're actually whaling, which, let's be frank, whaling is a awful and barbaric practice. And yeah, and the fact that we actually did this wholesale and like wiped out so many whales, like I can't believe it.
No, they're trying to bring it back too.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, Japan's doing some stuff about that to make it legal again.
Of course they are. Of course they are. Yeah.
Screw you, cow. Screw you, chicken.
Oh, that's South Park episode.
Screw you, dolphin.
So, what happens is there are no whales to be found until they get a tip that, hey, there's this big group of whales out in the middle of the ocean that if you go after them, you could probably get to them, except they're being guarded by this giant white whale. And he destroyed our ship, so don't go there because you'll never make it. And they're like, screw that, we're awesome. We're gonna go after this. And of course, the whale is kind of smart, like somewhere between like a Jurassic Park and a Jaws 2: The Revenge, where it's like, I'm coming after you guys because I know what you were trying to do, and you were the ones who harpooned my friends. And yeah. So I don't know. All of this comes back to one central point. If you have as good of a story as Moby-Dick, if you have as awesome of characters as Captain Ahab, why are you switching them out for these other kind of low rent versions of them? Like, why do we need to know the true story of what happened? Yes, it's harrowing and it's supposedly real, but we should just make a really good Moby-Dick movie. And I would have rather have seen that than this, which I don't know what this is. It was boring. It was not well told. It was sometimes cool to look at and sometimes interesting, but overall, just again, same problem as Macbeth, having a hard time translating the source material onto the screen and making it interesting, and trying to go for big action sequences to try and wow the audience, rather than looking for the real character and the real story behind it. Exact same place as I am on Macbeth, 4 out of 10.
So seems to be like the like you mentioned, the kind of the common theme with this week is people need to know when to leave well enough alone. I mean, there's a reason why we consider some of these, tales and books and plays and everything else classics, is because they were the author or the artist's work at the height of their brilliance. So, by all means, you can take an idea and try to do a modern take, like we mentioned with Joss Whedon and Much Ado About Nothing. But he didn't change the story. He didn't make it into a murder mystery. So by all means, let's see new versions of Moby-Dick and Macbeth or Hamlet or whatever else. But you got to remember, you can't go back and try to come up with a quote unquote better version, because it's not gonna happen. So I don't know. That was just my random thoughts, because I said I didn't see him, so I can't weigh in too much.
I think that's pretty much the case, and I just there was no reason to mess around with these. I mean, I kind of see where they were going, but it just didn't work as well as if they would have just been more straightforward with all of it.
So anyway, those are the movies for this week. Something I can't weigh in on, though, because I've seen it a million times, is, of course, Return of the Jedi, the last movie in our Star Wars retrospective. I'm going to honestly hop in every now and then and say some stuff, but as we can all tell, my voice is going more and more every second. So, Andy, I know you love this movie, so why don't you start out with it, everything that you love about it, and I'll kind of chime in kind of throughout.
Sure. What I find most interesting about Return of the Jedi is it seems to present a kind of interesting, stark dividing line amongst Star Wars fans. There are certain people who are like, This is where the movie started going downhill. Lucas got cute. He wanted to create little teddy bears with the Ewoks, and he started, creating stuff for commercial reasons rather
But see,
than.
if you look at it though, the funny thing about that is the Ewoks originally were these weird flamingo birds. So I think when people, because I've never had a problem with Ewoks myself, so when people say, "Oh, well, the Ewoks are this and that," I'm like, you do know that that was like the final iteration of this creature. It didn't start that way. So, yeah, of course they're going to sell more teddy bears. They're going to sell flamingos, but still.
Yeah, and there were other iterations where the Ewoks were Wookiees and
Yeah.
on the Wookiee planet, and there were other versions where the Ewoks were more feral and kind of caveman-like. And I never had a problem with the Ewoks. I was also 6, so it hit me at right about that same age. But what I do want to talk about with Return of the Jedi that I think is the most important thing here.
No.
We'll get to that. But Return of the Jedi is a movie that grew up with me. As I mentioned, when I first saw it, and this was the first Star Wars movie that I actually remember seeing in the theater. I remember.
Mine too, actually. I saw it when it came out. It wasn't. I was 3, so I didn't see it in theaters when it came out, but I saw it later on. Like, they did a re-release a couple years later.
Yeah. But I'm amazed at then. So, I mean, obviously, I was watching it all throughout my childhood, the same way I watched all the other Star Wars movies ad nauseum. I have great memories of actually, I had a ton of the Return of the Jedi toys, and I would in the movie, and I would act it out with my action figures what was going on the screen as it was happening. And I love that. And I would go do the Sarlacc scene over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of fun, and I had tons of Ewoks, and that was great. So I really loved it as a kid, but getting to be a teenager and understanding this film more, and then growing into an adult, I started to understand that this movie wasn't about the Ewoks, and it wasn't about all of that other stuff, that it came down to those moments in the throne room between Vader and the Emperor, and it was that personal struggle. And when that happened,
it's a twisted love triangle.
when that all happened, it switched on a light in my mind, and suddenly the entire Star Wars universe was illuminated differently for me, and it became very grown up. It became this yes, it was a massive story about a battle of good and evil, and a space fight was happening and an on the ground battle was happening, but really it came down to the battle for two men's souls.
Yeah.
And how they were trying to turn Luke Skywalker, and how he was trying to turn his father back because he felt some sort of good in him. And that really resonated with me. Now, you mentioned the no thing. When the original re-release of the Blu-rays came out, I somewhat famously refused to buy them, and I put up.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I put up an article on Big Shiny Robot and on the Huffington Post and said, "This is why I canceled my Amazon order." Because Lucas messed around with that scene, and when the Emperor is hitting Luke with his Force lightning, and he says, "Father, please," and Vader looks at him, looks at the Emperor, looks back at him, and silently makes that decision to pick up the Emperor.
It's
and
perfect.
It is. It's so perfect. And then Lucas decides on the Blu-rays that he's going to make him go, no.
And it cheapens the scene, because the whole point of what made that so powerful was you'd sense that the inner anguish in Vader's mind about, do I follow my master? Do I save my son? I mean, you see, it was as badly as Hayden Christensen turned to the dark side in episode 3,
Yeah.
this was the most beautiful way for him to turn back to the light side.
Yeah.
And it was magnificent. And here's the thing, people like to bitch and moan about this, the special editions and the changes. Honestly, I don't care who shot first. I mean, if Harrison Ford doesn't care, why should I?
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
So there are some things that don't matter. I mean, they cleaned it up, added a few seconds, whatever else. But for me, this was the cardinal sin because that scene was perfect the way it was. It doesn't need it, and I'm sorry if you disagree, but you're wrong.
Well, and the whole idea was, well, we didn't have the technology in the 70s and 80s to do this the way that I wanted to, and so I'm doing this. It's like, no, George Lucas could have had Vader say no in 1983, and he didn't. He made that choice, and he's adding it back in as kind of a middle finger to all the fans who were pissed off at the prequels and the whole no, because that's what he's hearkening back to. The fact that you can say more with silence than a single word.
So, George Lucas.
Oh.
Shame.
Yes, exactly that. So, what's interesting too is Return of the Jedi is the one that got the most messed around with, between both the inclusion of that Jedi rock sequence in Jabba's palace with the music video,
with Sykes Noodles in her band,
and changing the Ewok celebration at the end from the Yub Nub song to the celebration across the universe.
And they gave the Rancor a radio. It was weird. So
that's really inside. I like that joke. Anyway, so I kind of view both of those as kind of sixes. It's like, I don't think either of them is actually like that sacred or that perfect. I know that I prefer to watch the originals because that was what Star Wars was to me growing up. But I also understand that the song, the Lapti Knack song that they're singing in Jedi was pretty terrible.
Well, I remember being, I think it was right before the special editions came out. Oh, man, it might have been after. I don't know. I think I was 15. And for Christmas one year, all I wanted was the box set of the Star Wars soundtracks. And I had one disc for each movie, and then I had a fourth disc that had almost like B-sides. It was like unreleased tracks or longer versions of famous tracks. And I'm very thankful that song's not on there, because as weird as the old original song was, it fit better with the theme of what was going on.
Yeah, but it still like stuck out like a sore thumb from like this other, a lot of other music, and the Yub Nub music from. I mean, I love that because that's probably what Ewoks would sound like if they're celebrating. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool. I did like in the special editions seeing the fall of the Empire across all these different worlds.
I did.
And it was cool seeing Coruscant for the first time. We'd never seen it before.
Yep.
And then of course with the Blu-rays they had to throw in Naboo and all the other fun stuff, and that was fun. I don't care about that. Like I said, we're not gonna go back and beat a dead horse, but the addition of I still have not watched the special edition of Return of the Jedi because of that. I own the whole set. I've seen all the movies again, and I will go back and I'm doing a rewatch before Force Awakens, so I will go see it. But honestly, I've had that for years now. I can't bring myself to go watch it.
Yeah, you know what? We ended up buying the Blu-rays, and this most recent version.
Oh, the steelbooks?
It does not have the no on it.
The steelbooks don't?
Well, I don't know if the steelbooks don't, but the version that I have, for some reason, it not. So
see, and again, the joke I made about the Rancor having a radio was from Steven Spielberg going back and messing with ET and taking away their guns and giving them radios. At least Steven Spielberg had the balls to go back and say, hey, you know what? I was wrong, and fixed it. So if Lucas wanted to go back and be like, hey, I was wrong and took that out, then you know what? More power to you.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you.
Yep. So there is no on the versions that I have, or else I would refuse to watch them because I braced myself and then it didn't happen. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is all right then. Because like I said, that was like the pivotal scene,
Yeah.
and why I really loved that movie. But just that is so cool. There's so much in this movie that's really cool, and you don't notice it as a kid, but it looks like from the beginning that Luke is a sort of weird dark Jedi. He's
Yeah.
now dressed all in black. He shows up and he starts force choking people in Jabba's palace. It's like he's not necessarily like acting super 100% like we would think a Jedi Knight would act.
Yeah, and something kind of fun too, for anyone reading comics. If you go back, and you should be reading the Star Wars ones, the whole series are amazing. But the Darth Vader comic is my favorite. It's my favorite comic out right now, and it takes place in between episode 4 and 5. And there's a scene where he actually goes to visit Jabba the Hutt to recruit Boba Fett, and you go back and pick it up, and it's like it's on the Marvel Now app now. It's or you can pick it up probably cheap at your comic shop, Dr. Volts if you're in Salt Lake. But it's a scene. Every single frame is a shot-by-shot retake of when Luke walks into Jabba's palace. From when the door opened, he walks in, he chokes the Gamorrean guard, he stands on the Rancor pit. I mean, it's go back and see it, like, pick it up, and then maybe watch the movie at the same time. It's really, really cool.
That's super awesome. Those comics are absolutely amazing.
But yeah, it's cool because Luke, Luke comes in and we won't go into conspiracy theories or what we think about it, but the whole thing, people say, oh, when Vader turned back to the light side, Luke became a Jedi and destroyed the Sith. That brought balance to the Force. That's what Anakin was supposed to have happen. No, the balance of the Force means balance, not like it's weighted towards the light side. So if you think about it, at the end of this movie, you've got a character who is still training to be a Jedi. He never actually becomes a Jedi. He never goes through the trials, even though Yoda says, oh, well, you must face Vader to become a Jedi. He doesn't do that. He actually beats Vader using the dark side and then, gets control of himself. So at the end of the movie, you've killed the Sith and the Master and the Apprentice, and the Jedi are dead. There are no Jedi because Luke never becomes one. And by all means, accounts by purposes, he was kind of like they say, a gray Jedi, we'll say, uses the light and the dark side. So if you think about it, at the end of this movie, there is true balance to the Force because there's no Sith, there's no Jedi, there are Force users. And so I'm not trying to do speculation about Force Awakens, but I kind of hope they go into that with that mindset because, like we say, Kylo Ren, he's a Knight of Ren. He's not a Dark Jedi. He's not a Sith. So I think it'd be kind of cool to go into that where, the Force really is at balance. The Jedi are no more. The Sith are no more. And they just kind of go and do something new. So that's what my take on the end of it was. That was a 2-hour conversation I had with Lee George Cade a couple months ago.
We had a very interesting conversation with that on my Doctor Who podcast where we just speculated about what the movie's going to be about. So if you do want to hear speculation, we got a whole lot of that over there. But I agree. I think that would be an interesting place for them to go because Luke also understood at the very end that like the way to win was like he throws away his lightsaber and he's like, nope.
Yeah, and that was a lesson you learned from Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight you. That's it. And he's laying there getting force lightninged at the mercy of his belief that his father would actually save him.
Yeah. And
that's very interesting.
So Jedi, I mean, like you mentioned at the beginning, there are some detractors. I'm sorry, I don't see their viewpoints. I don't understand where they're coming from. Is it a perfect movie? No. I mean, Empire still ranks above it as far as a better film. But had I been watching this back in 1990 or 1983 and doing a review, I easily would have put it at an 8.5 or a 9.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. Like 8.5 or 9, I don't know exactly. It's like it feels like 8.5 isn't quite enough, but it feels like 9 is maybe a little
8.75.
8.75, 8.77 repeating. I don't know, something somewhere in there.
8.777 with a line over the last 7.
Exactly. It's one of those. It's really good, and I, you look at those huge space battles, and we got B wings. I love the B wings. I
Oh
think
yeah.
they look so cool. It's so much cool stuff happening in Jabba's palace. So much cool stuff happening in that final space battle. Admiral Akbar. That's a trap. Just there's a ton there, and you got a lot of cool character development with Han and Leia down on Endor. Even not doing a whole lot, but they actually kind of he's become a little more wizened. He's
Mhm.
when she's like when she's talking to Luke and he shows up and he's like, "Oh, you could tell Luke? Is that who you could tell?" And she's like, and he's like, "Eh." And he's gonna walk off frustrated, and then he goes back and he's like, "Look."
So I am a little confused why Leia agreed to make out with her brother when she's like, "I've always known."
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's one of those like I've always known that Kylo Ren was Luke Skywalker.
Hey, if you can't keep it in the pants, keep it in the family. So,
Jeez.
all right. So I do have a bit of movie trivia for you. I want to test you.
Okay.
So, in over the Sarlacc pit on Jabba's barge, there are 3 guards that have names that are linked to a very, very famous sci-fi movie. Do you know what they are?
I do not. Wow.
There was 3 guards. One was named Klaatu, one was named Barada, and one was named Nikto. And
No
those
way.
three, as people who know, were the Nadir stood still. It was the word that she had to say to the robot to keep it from killing everyone.
Klaatu, Barada, no.
Yeah, but I can't remember if this is true or not. But I believe because Billy D. Williams, his son, was on the set with him and helping out doing stuff, and he was one of the Weequay guards, and I think he was one of those. I can't remember. If you go on Big Shiny Robot, Brian Young did an interview with him a couple years ago. I helped transcribe part of it, and that was one of the stories that he was talking about. So, kind of fun little old school, sci-fi trivia fact there for people who want to sound smart at pub quiz or if you ever got on Jeopardy.
That's really smart. I did not know that. That's really cool. And here I was thinking I knew so much Star Wars trivia. Nope. That's amazing.
So cool. Well, I mean, I think that kind of wraps us up with that.
Yep.
Next week we've got this really big movie. I'm sure everyone's really excited for it. I know I've been counting down the days for Sisters, which is the Amy Poehler, Tina Fey comedy. But of course, we have Star Wars, The Force Awakens, which I know I've been excited for since the moment I got the text that Disney bought Star Wars and the new movie's coming out this year. So that's all we're going to be talking about.
No. I
what?
haven't seen the road chip, and we will talk about the road chip.
Okay, I guess we have to eat our vegetables before we have our dessert.
And I will also get to see The Big Short, which is opening wide this week. Actually, my screenings of Sisters and The Big Short are at the exact same time, and I can't decide which one to go to.
I would, from the feedback I have gotten from people who cannot review it yet, I would say go with The Big Short.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. And what will probably happen is I will find a Saturday sometime within the next couple of weeks, or just a day off work because I have some time off work that I'm taking, where I will just go in and I will watch Star Wars like all day long, and then in the middle I'll go see Sisters as well.
So, all right.
I love Amy Poehler and Tina Fey.
Oh, I do too. I heard some mixed things on that. So, but yeah, Star Wars. All next week is Star Wars. But we're really excited for it. We have some friends who are seeing it, who did get into some press screenings. I've heard rumors of. So I know they're excited for it. Honestly, the movie does premiere on Monday night over in Europe. So if you are listening to this before Monday night, I'm tempted to go on media blackout for 3 days because I don't want some idiot to pop up and be like, Han died, because that would just be rude. But keep an eye out, just beware of that, because there are going to be people halfway across the world who will have seen it. But yeah, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. All we can think about is Star Wars.
Real fans will not post spoilers. I will, however, be posting fake spoilers. Like Kylo Ren was really Jar Jar Binks. Who knew?
Or BB-8 was the Emperor, which is my favorite comic right now. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully next week when we're excited for Star Wars, I will not sound like Ursula the Sea Witch. Have a good week, and Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars.
And may the force be with you.
And hail Satan, and have a lovely afternoon.